You are stuck in the belly of the earth, enveloped in pitch darkness. Long before the enemy ever snaps a trigger, this hole tortures you in its own right. It is a 15-inch entrance shaft, a vertical chute of red clay carved straight down through the jungle roots. You were chosen for one simple, brutal physical truth. You were small enough to squeeze through an opening that would trap another man until he suffocated. Tonight, the tropical heat of the Iron Triangle bakes the soil above, but down here, the earth holds a heavy, damp chill. Squeezed into the narrow shaft, your shoulders press so tightly against the earthen walls that you can distinctly hear the rapid, shallow breath of Miller, the soldier standing at the surface holding the trapdoor. The air down here is a nauseating brew of stagnant groundwater, rotting roots, human waste, and a lingering stench of burnt cordite that clings to the back of your throat, refusing to dissipate. You clutch your .45 caliber Colt pistol against your chest. The cold steel bites into your palm, and everything around you feels bone-chillingly oppressive. The time is 3 a.m. on April 12, 1968. You are 3 feet beneath the jungle floor at the edge of a vast, invisible subterranean maze. Beside the trapdoor above stands Miller. You've known him for 6 months now, long enough to read his mood simply by the posture of his shoulders, long enough that even silence between you carries a shared language. At this moment, as he lowers the wooden lid over the opening, he whispers a brief prayer, his voice neither low nor hurried, just speaking with quiet composure into the dark. You suddenly realize the faith in your own heart has long since faded. You can't bring yourself to speak as openly as he does. So you stay silent. The darkness wraps tightly around you as the wooden hatch shuts out the stars. Tucked inside your chest pocket is a letter written at the base camp in Chi, sealed long ago. Back then, you were secretly convinced this letter would never need to be sent. It's addressed to your mother in Indiana, containing only 2 lines. Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine. At the pre-operation briefing, the intelligence officer had laid out the tactical blueprint with methodical clarity. The tunnel system was merely a localized storage cache, built for temporary shelter. Flamethrowers and tear gas canisters would neutralize enemy positions from the surface. Engineers would pump air and smoke to clear the shafts before anyone stepped foot inside. By the time a tunnel rat descended, enemy combat capability within the sector was expected to be cut by 80%. According to the plan, a single scout would clear the 50-yard stretch and return to the surface within 20 minutes. The officer's tone had been as flat as if he were reading a train timetable, as though the tactical blueprint and the reality beneath the red clay would match down to the millimeter. In the staging area, Miller had turned to look at you, asking if the sweep would truly go as smoothly as planned. You replied, "It will." When you said those words, you genuinely believed it. That belief was the final piece of pure conviction you would carry down into that hole. At 3:15 a.m., you drop flat onto your stomach and slide into the horizontal crawl space. The tunnel is far tighter than reported, barely 2 feet wide, forcing you to drag yourself forward using only your elbows and the tips of your boots. Stripped of your flak jacket and helmet to fit through the squeeze, you wear only a damp undershirt and trousers. Your flashlight beam cuts through the gloom, but you switch it off almost immediately. In this darkness, light is a flare that announces your presence to anyone waiting in the shadows. You scramble forward with everything you have. The sounds around you are entirely different from what you had imagined. No thunderous combat noise, only the heavy hum of your own racing pulse and the sharp, relentless scraping of your elbows against packed dirt. The overlapping layers of silence mesh into a disorienting haze, impossible to navigate, settling like a crushing weight right between your brows. You have no time to panic, you just crawl. The very first sight that greets your flashlight beam makes your heart sink. The tunnel isn't a simple abandoned storage trench at all. The tear gas pumped from the surface had failed entirely, blocked off by clever water traps and airtight wooden bulkheads built deep within the clay. The subterranean fortress stands completely intact, stretching out in a multi-level labyrinth, pockmarked with pitch-black firing slits and hidden drop pits. Under the earth, the enemy doesn't need heavy machine guns. A single bamboo spear or a wire-strung grenade in a narrow pipe is 100% lethal. The damp floor beneath you turns sticky, patch by patch, with old blood and stagnant mud. You deliberately avert your eyes from a half-buried skeleton protruding from the earthen wall, burying your face as you press on, crawling, sliding, feeling the soil with bare fingers, then surging forward again. Hazards appear one after another in every form imaginable. Tripwires tied to rusted artillery shells, drop pits lined with venomous bamboo punji stakes, and bamboo pit vipers tied to roots at head height, swinging silently in the narrow pass. You throw your body flat against the cold clay floor, pressing tight against the dirt for 10 full seconds while your heart hammers against your ribs. Taking 3 deep breaths, you look down and realize your pistol is still gripped tightly in your hand. You have no memory of when your thumb disengaged the safety. Muscle memory had readied the weapon without a thought. 50 yards ahead lies a Z-bend turn. Between here and there is nothing but an airless, defenseless dirt pipe. Entrenched in the darkness, the enemy commands every inch of the passage. The original operational plan is completely shattered. All that remains before your eyes is this stretch of fatal tunnel. And in the chaos, you realize a single truth. Stopping is far more dangerous than pushing forward. You keep going, not out of bravado, but because behind you there is only an impossible backward crawl, and ahead lies the only chance at finishing the sweep and seeing the sky again. Hunching your shoulders, you inch through the narrow gap, falling flat twice when roots snag your clothes, never once looking back. Beyond the Z-bend lies a small subterranean chamber, roughly 4 feet high. You slump against the earthen wall, your cheek pressed to its rough, freezing surface. The air is dangerously thin down here, smelling of old rice, damp straw, and sweat. As your flashlight beam sweeps the room, you realize you have stumbled into an underground staging post. Without warning, a faint rustle echoes from a low archway to your left. You raise your Colt pistol, your hands steadying despite the exhaustion shaking your limbs. Experience has taught you that panic down here means immediate death. Miller isn't here to cover your back, nor are any of the men from your squad. The radios don't work through 30 feet of solid earth. Now, there's only you, your handgun, and whatever lurks beyond that narrow clay archway. Moving forward is a different kind of brutal compared to the crawl on the main pipe. The main pipe demanded raw guts and endurance. Clearing a subterranean chamber tests pure nerve and lethal precision. Inch by inch, you slide your knees through the loose soil, keeping your silhouette low to stay beneath any potential line of fire. You advance along a narrow drainage trench in the floor, a feature you had studied on a captured diagram back at base 3 days ago. Every foot gained feels bought with everything you have. By the time you reach the wooden door of the inner chamber, you find it slightly ajar. The defenders have pulled back into a deeper sublevel. You step into the dirt room and look through a narrow observation slit. The lower gallery unfolds below. Storage crates, crude bamboo bunks, and hand-drawn maps pinned to the earth wall. You force yourself to look away. The narrow pipe that gave you passage moments ago looks pitifully small from inside here. Rusted ammunition boxes lie stacked against the wall, and the embers of a small kerosene lamp still emit a faint trace of heat. Until now, you thought you were merely fighting to clear a bunker. Standing here, the truth strikes you with cold clarity. Everyone is just a piece on a high-command warboard. The essence of this war was a gamble on how many men could survive the dark beneath the jungle floor. You lead yourself deeper into the network, following a haulage trench that slopes gradually upward. 50 yards past the main chamber, the passage widens near a hidden ventilation shaft, a suspected observation post overlooking the jungle above. You push open a hanging straw mat and step inside, weapon raised. There are no armed soldiers inside, but it is far from empty. An elderly woman crouches in the corner on a woven mat, hiding 2 young children beside her. There is not a trace of gratitude on their faces. Their eyes are like those of trapped animals, their bodies frozen as they stare at you. Terror wiping away all expression. One of the children sobs silently, throat choked, unable to utter a sound in the dim light. For years, they have lived beneath the bombing runs of the surface war, and now a heavily armed American soldier has breached their sanctuary. Yet the only sound filling their ears is still the ruthless roar of conflict. You're left speechless. Your training taught you to view these tunnels purely as a battleground. Yet here are innocent civilians trapped right in their dark heart, looking at your mud-caked face and drawn gun with sheer terror. You slowly lower your pistol, step back in the corridor, and whisper to yourself, "Clear." As you turn away, a heavy mix of emotions churns inside, but you push it down and keep moving. In a war zone, you have no other choice. By mid-afternoon, you navigate back toward the primary vertical shaft to link up with Miller. The subterranean fight breaks down into these quick, brutal encounters, clearing one dark crawl space only to face the next. For hours, you have heard nothing from the world above, yet you hold onto the image of Miller waiting at the top of the chute. At the base of the exit shaft, a sudden burst of gunfire echoes from the surface entrance. The shooting lasts only 2 seconds, but a heavy body thuds onto the dirt above, followed by a sharp cry. You scramble up the wooden rungs as fast as your bleeding limbs can carry you. Reaching the daylight, you find Miller collapsed against a rubber tree. A sniper's bullet fired from the tree line has struck his shoulder. A medic arrives within 3 minutes. After inspecting the entry wound, he says, "He's lucky. Missed the main artery by an inch. He's going to make it. He'll be medevaced out to Saigon for treatment." You stand by, watching the medic dress the wound, your mind completely numb. Seeing this friend of 6 months lying bleeding on the red soil of the Iron Triangle, you feel not even a ripple of emotion. This isn't temporary shock, but a cold indifference that has seeped into your very marrow. Listening to the medic, you simply nod, check the magazine of your Colt, and wipe the red mud from your face. In this exact moment, you have completely changed. This realization didn't come in the airless pipe or inside the dark underground room, but right here, standing over the wounded Miller in a moment of utter void. The person who stood at the top of the shaft hours ago, stubbornly believing we will all be fine, was left behind in that red clay, forever, never to return. You can never find your former self again. By 9 p.m., your unit has established a night perimeter at the edge of the clearing. The sound of artillery in the distance has thinned out into sporadic, intermittent rumbles, like a heavy machine slowly grinding to a halt. You chew on cold, hard field rations, tasting nothing, cleaning the dirt and grit from your pistol in the dark by touch alone. A squad leader walks over to your position, pauses in silence for a moment, and asks softly, "You holding up all right, Rat?" You reply, "I'm fine." He gives you a long look, nods, and asks no further questions. This is the tacit understanding of war. Someone is willing to offer comfort, yet you choose to lean against a high wall. Some burdens are too heavy for words. It's better to carry them alone. You find a spot against the roots of a banyan tree and sit down, pulling out the letter from your chest pocket. The letter sealed in Siuchi and carried close to your heart through the dark, never to be mailed. You stare at the sweat-stained envelope for a moment before slipping it back into your pocket. There's no need to send it now. You survived. The hole was cleared. The objective was secured. Historians will later write about the tunnel networks as a tactical marvel of asymmetric warfare, a judgment devoid of any falsehood. You try to picture your mother's house in Indiana. The porch swing, the small kitchen garden, the memory of your father working in the yard. Every detail remains crystal clear. Yet the face of the boy who was supposed to return home, eagerly awaited by his family, has grown blurred and unrecognizable. What keeps flashing in your mind are the pitch-black turns of the pipe, the silently weeping children in the dark, and Miller lying wounded on the red dirt. Eventually, the war ended, and you returned home to lead a quiet life in Indiana, a life like your parents, the very life they had worked so hard hoping to give you. When your children asked about your time in Vietnam, you simply said, "I worked in construction and cleared some trenches over there." That answer was enough to satisfy them. Children always fill in the blanks with glory and legend, imagining the glowing, fearless heroes depicted in movies and books. You let them hold onto those fantasies. Explaining the truth of the dark was far too difficult. You could never tell them that the young man who dropped down into that 15-inch hole and the man who returned home after the war were two entirely different people. It wasn't the jungle that stole your former self. It was that in those narrow yards of life and death struggle beneath the earth, that pure, hopeful boy couldn't follow you all the way back up to the light. 40 years later, You passed away quietly in your sleep. In a cedar chest in the attic, your daughter found a sealed, yellowed envelope addressed to her grandmother. Opening it with careful fingers, she read the same 2 lines written all those years ago. "Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine." Most men who crawled into the tunnels of CU, she rarely spoke of those hours beneath the earth. It was not because they had nothing to say, but because the world only wanted to see sanitized, heroic stories carved into public monuments. Yet the suffocating dark and the silence they carried in their hearts could never fit into such polished narratives.